Mr. Pond Boss, tell me what to do.
Let's see where we're going.
To make all my Lunker Lake dreams come true.
Hello, everybody. Bob Lusk, the Pond Boss, checking in with you guys on this Wednesday afternoon. Hoping that this video is going and that you guys can see it. So I know we got a couple of viewers, so we'll see where it goes. I'm hanging out in the RV, which is in a rural part of the planet. I'm not quite sure how good this signal is, but here we go. You know what? The girls are kind of making fun of me today because I told them I wanted to talk about happy water. Oh, good. I see Chuck Brinkman, Devin Thompson, Tori Rhodes. I see Tori. Good to see you guys. Jacob West. Good to see Jacob. So, yeah, all right. We're going to have an audience. Woohoo! Let's go. Here we go. Hey, you guys know the drill here. Hashtag Pond Boss Magazine in the comments section. Click like. Share this to your timeline, and you're going to be eligible for a drawing for a Pond Boss hat and the Pond Boss mug, which I don't have one in the RV. I'm going to have to get one in the office later on in the week. I see Drew. Hey, I'm going to be talking to seeing Drew. Kenny Sanderson from Kansas. So anyway, looks like this video quality is not that good, but we're just, we're going to go roll with it until I can figure out a better way. So, I thought tonight I would talk about happy water. I get some grief from people about using that term, happy water. When I travel around the country and I talk to people and share things with them about, how to grow bigger fish and how to have a better pond, the very first thing I start with is water. Because if you don't have good, clean, healthy water, everything else is irrelevant. And over the years, I've kind of begun to see what nature's way is. And nature's way is where you have the best habitat, which in this case, it all starts with the medium that the fish live in, water. If you don't have good, clean, healthy, happy water, then the rest of the stuff makes any difference. I mean, that's the vehicle and the medium in which our fish and our insects and our plants all live in. Now, what's funny, that's not funny, it's normal, it's natural, that all these living and breathing things impact how happy the water is. They either add to it or take from it. So we're going to talk about some of that stuff today. So I'm going to kind of scroll down here, see some of the comments. Already got to say hello to Tori Rose. There's Jacob West, Devin Thompson, Billy Bates, John Henry. Good afternoon, Frank James. Frank, I don't know if you guys were able to escape I know you guys were not in the bullseye for the tornadoes today. I've got a son that lives south of Birmingham, Alabama. I was talking to him earlier today, talking to his wife, and boy, they're dodging some bullets, and it ain't done yet. So, there's not anything we can do about the weather. It's exciting, it's exhilarating, and it's scary. And right now, I think they're feeling all that. Excited, exhilarated, and scary. The grandkids are wearing a helmet, but I don't know if that's good enough. If you got a wedge tornado coming at you, you got to get below ground. So I'm a huge fan of the weather myself and the sheer awe of it. And I'm going to kind of keep watching the radar as the evening goes on and check in with them. All right, look at there, Frank James, Chuck Brinkman, you guys got it. Hey, there's John Krause. I love John Krause. John is a long-time radio talk show host. He hosted a garden show on 50,000-watt blowtorch WBAP out of the Fort Worth area for years and years and years. And he's retired. He's living in Illinois. He's a master gardener. I mean, when it comes to growing stuff, that guy grows stuff. I'm so glad that he's watching the show. Tori Rhodes is asking, did we sell the villa? We did. I'll tell you that story real quick. Back in, I guess it was late August, Debbie and I were hanging out with my son, Jonathan, and she'll shoot me, our son, Jonathan. And Jonathan is a financial advisor and a wealth management guy. He manages money for rich people, which doesn't include us. So he was sitting there, we were at his house. He says, Debbie, it's time for you guys to put your place on the market. With this pandemic, people are escaping the city, which that had been going on for 6 or 7 months by that point, or 4 or 5 months. Anyway, I'd been watching. I've been working with landowners that moved from the city to their weekend places, and the weekend places became home. He said, I think right here, if you'll list your place before the election, that you're likely going to be able to sell at the top of the market. So we talked it over, he recommended a realtor to us. It was a high-end realtor. So we put the house on the market. We had over 35 people look at it. Not one offer until right after January 1st. People waited until after the first of the year. Elections were passed. They kind of had an idea what was going to happen. Mortgage rates were low, still are. So yes, we sold Lusk Lodge, 2. And now we're looking around. Here I am hanging out in Lusk RV number 1. And Debbie and I are homeless, which I've never been that so excited to have my life simplified. So basically we had a big house that we built to share with people, which we did. I can't tell you how many events we had there. We had, oh my gosh, baby showers, weddings, the Institute of Higher Pondology, which I'll talk to you more about that in a minute. But so much, that's enough about us. Yes, we sold it. And now we're couch hopping around grandchildren and hanging out in the RV. And I've gotten more work done in the last 5 days than I probably have gotten done in the last 5 months. So all the distractions, all the commitments, all that is just is dwindled. So thanks for asking. So I want to talk about happy water. Let me see. I'm going to scroll down here and see who all we got going on here. Make sure I don't mess anything up early on. John Funk, Mid-Michigan. Let me see here. Bear with me, guys, gals. Fred Bingaman. Hi, Fred. John Funk, Mid-Michigan. Hope you're high and dry. Boy, we are, with that storm system that's hammering the Mid-South right now, came through where I am about 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock this morning. And it did not have nearly the energy or the power. And once the sun came up and started cranking out some heat, and it met more moisture from the Gulf, that stuff just went nuts. Hi, Jeremy Duckworth. Good to see you, buddy. Bob Mayer. Frank James, we're okay. Good news is so is my forage pond. Oh, your copper-nosed bluegill survived the deep freeze. That's huge. Good deal, man. I'm glad to hear that. Kim Moore from Hi, Kim, honey. Good to see you in Central Illinois. John Funk's been a year. Yeah, it's been a weird year of weather. Nick Allen, spring-fed and constant runoff water, a good thing. Runoff from surrounding tillable fields. Let's talk. That totally fits right in with the concepts I want to talk about tonight about happy water. So, Nick, we're going to take yours first. Spring-fed and constant runoff water, a good thing. I'll tell you why it is a good thing. I'll tell you the upsides and I'll tell you the downsides. But first, let's talk about what water needs to really be happy. Now, I'm going to take credit for that term, so let's give credit where credit's due. Although maybe I didn't make it up. I don't know. But I'm going to call it happy water. So what does that mean? Happy water in your pond is water that is consistent. It's autonomous. Autonomous meaning a good healthy range of temperatures, a good healthy range of pH, a good healthy range of biology. Water chemistry is affected by the biology of the water, and biology is affected by the chemistry of the water. Now, when I'm talking to people and they're saying, well, how do I know if my water's healthy? How do I know if my water's happy? Well, the first thing we got to understand is that water that's inconsistent chemically and biologically is unhappy water. Water that is consistent chemically and biologically is happy water. Now, let me just kind of dig down into that. I noticed in the description, the girl said I was going to tie some water into knots. Aren't they funny? So, where I'm going is this. pH, people think pH is a big deal. That's like saying a ruler is a big deal or a measuring tape is a big deal. pH is a measuring tape. It's a ruler. That's what it does. It measures your water. It's what affects the pH that is meaningful. So here's the bottom line. If you've got alkalinity that ranges between 40 and 150, you've got perfect pH, because that alkalinity is fundamentally a measurement of calcium carbonate or lime. And what that is your water's antacid. It's the Tums, it's the Rolaids, It's the long-term Prilosec for your water. That's what buffers the water against pH changes. The pH only tells you that the water changed, but it's not really telling you why. Alkalinity is a big deal. That's what helps stabilize water and make it happy. Because what's going on chemically, if your water's got minerals dissolved in it, which it likely does, I mean, if we were to try to grow fish in distilled water, they would die. Because there's nothing in distilled water. It's pure. Fish have got to have minerals. They got to have some level of different kinds of metals because that's part of what allows their cells to metabolize. You know, they absorb some of that from the water. Some of it they get from what they eat that absorbed it from the water. You know, and so the pH is a measurement, but you got to have some minerals and naturally there'll be some metals. Now, scientists call water the universal solvent. Anything that can dissolve into water will dissolve into water. And that's a big deal. You know, you guys that have watched the show for very long know that I talk about whatever can dissolve into water, which can be calcium, it could be lime, it could be gypsum, it could be alum, it could be grass clippings, might even be pieces of a Volkswagen. You know, whatever can dissolve into water will. So what makes water happy is how stable it can become based on your management practices. If you can manage it to where it's stable, where you've got a consistent temperature, say from the thermocline up, where you've got a consistent pH, where you've got consistent alkalinity, where the water's color is fairly consistent, you know, where you can, and believe it or not, you can manage the temperature by the way that you aerate, you know, and so keeping water happy is a pretty big deal. Now, Nick, I'm going to answer your question. A spring-fed pond, the good thing about spring water is it's pretty consistent. It's going to come in at the same temperature, but it's going to be influenced by the temperature of the weather. It's going to have consistent minerals, metals, things like that dissolved in it, where runoff water is going to be sporadic, and it's going to bring in whatever it runs over. Now, think about that. It's going to bring in whatever it runs over. If it runs over ag fields, tillable fields, it's going to bring in silt. It's going to bring in fertilizer. It's going to bring pesticides. You know, so as long as you know that and you understand the consequences of that, then you can manage for it and manage around it. So I would much rather have runoff from a tillable field than no runoff at all. You know, so understanding how that works. Now, I tell you what, I'd advise people that have ponds that are near tillable fields. Almost every time a tillable field where there's a pond, that means you can't grow corn on it. You know, so the water runs down to the low point, turns laterally and downhill and moves. That's where the pond gets built. So people aren't plowing where ponds are built. So there's typically room, if you can, build another small pond immediately upstream from the pond that you want to fish out of or turn into your swimming pond or whatever you want to do with it. So if you can build a little silt catching pond that you can control the water level, you can capture silt, you can capture fertility to some extent. You can hold it back, let the silt settle, not fall on, go on down, run into your pond, and you can use that as a reservoir to keep your pond full when it's not raining or you're not getting any runoff. So there's my basic answer about that. Holy cow! Now let's see here. I'm going to scroll down here because I see, we got 37 comments already, and I'm already behind. Let's go here. Let's see here. Kyle Edwards, pre-spawn bass on fire right now in Mississippi. Holy cow, you got tornadoes around you and you're going fishing. I love it. Way to go, Kyle. You are the man. Let's see here. Kyle says, caught a nice 8-pounder today between the storms. Dude, I'm going to tell you, I'm real proud of that. Because if anybody can catch an 8-pound bass, and you know what, this is goofy as heck, but prior to the passage of a storm, that's a great time to go fishing. You know, when you see that barometric change and that low pressure system's coming in and the storm is about to hit you, the barometric pressure is dropping, that is a fantastic time to go fishing. Ty Klebe, Ty Pig Patrol on Instagram, if you want to find him, he loves to fish when the weather is about to get miserable. Actually, he told me a story one time about when he was a kid. that he went fishing in the neighborhood in Lincoln, Nebraska, where he grew up, and there were tornado warnings and going off. The horns or the sirens were blasting. He was catching fish. He wasn't going to leave. You know, finally, the place where he was fishing, the guy went out and said, "Hey, your mother just called. You need to get in the house." So he ran in the house, and then when the storm passed, he went fishing again. There's Wyatt. Good to see Wyatt. Ron R. Dwayne. Good to see Ron. Good evening from Indiana, Mike McPherson. You know, about our home search, we're looking, but, you know, what I think it's this way pretty much all across the nation. With as crazy as the housing market is right now, I don't care if we find one now. We actually made an offer on a house, offered full price, cash. Didn't get it. Somebody else offered full price cash plus $15,000 over the list price. Good luck to them. I'd rather just sit back, not make a lateral move, you know, let the money that we just got from our house grow a little bit, and then see what happens here in 6 or 8 months, or even a year, or a year and a half. We'll see. You know, it's really funny. I've lived a pretty cool life. I've had a blast. And like Jacob West, he and his dad offered for us to come hang out a few days in their cabin on their weekend place. We've had 5 or 6 people call and say, "Hey, if you need a place to hang out, we got one." And we're going to take Jacob and his dad up on it. Dave Weber, evening Bob the Bulldozer, finished the half-acre bluegill pond last Thursday. Have some water, but not happy yet. Question, benefit or detriment to put some fathead minnow spawning habitat structure and adding 5 pounds of fathead minnows? I think that's a great idea. You bet. I think that's a great idea. Add the fathead minnows, add the habitat structure, 4 fathead minnows. There's nothing wrong with mixing fathead minnows with your bluegills. Baby fatheads are good bluegill food, actually. So I think that's a good symbiotic relationship. How do you like that? That sounds pretty cool, don't it? Hey, I want to remind everybody, I got to talk to Chris Blood today with Texas Hunter Feeders, ordered a couple of feeders for a guy. And I can't thank Texas Hunter enough for our partnership with them and their sponsorship to this program. They've got the best, absolutely the best customer service that I've ever come across. I mean, you place an order for a feeder. If you get it to them before 2 o'clock, it's shipped that day. You know, if something goes wrong, which isn't normal, they're going to handle it that day. That day. There has been a couple of times out of the hundreds of feeders that we've sold over the years that we've had to replace a motor or two. Could be because water got in there or something happened to it. That day, they'll send it. You know, so I love those guys. And after we finish this video, I'm going to put up this live broadcast. I'm going to put up a little video that I shot about 5:45. My son and daughter-in-law have got a 1-acre pond down here that's just chock full of bluegills. We added some bass, but the feeder went off, and those bluegill just went bananas. So about 5 or 10 minutes after I'm through with this broadcast, I'll upload that video. You guys can see a pretty typical, maybe a little better than typical, bluegill feeding episode. Okay, Danny Mack, another great week. Hello there. Billy Bates, if you wanted the ultimate trophy bass pond, where in the country would you build your pond? Central Florida, Southern California, South Texas. Where could you grow the biggest bass, do you feel? You know, I love that question. I think, I tell you what. I tell you what I'm going to tell you. I love South Texas, and there's somebody weed eating outside. I'm sure you can hear it. He has no idea I'm doing this. So, what I'm going to tell you is, you know, all those places you mentioned, Southern California, Central Florida, South Texas, I tell you what I think. I think we could grow the biggest bass along a line from about, the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex across through southern Arkansas, south of Nashville, Tennessee, then curve around north of Atlanta, Georgia, along the eastern seaboard, up to Kerr Lake around North Carolina. South of that line, I think that's where you can grow the biggest bass. Now, here's why. One thing I've learned is that the growing season for largemouth bass is pretty consistent nationwide. Denver, Colorado has as many great bass growing days as South Texas does. A perfect bass growing day is when the water temperature is between 83 or 84 down to about 55 or 58. Where in South Texas, the water temperature gets way too hot. And you get in upstate New York, they have 125 perfect growing days for bass. So does South Carolina, so does South California, so does South Florida. So the growing days for bass are not nearly as relevant as the growing days for bait fish. Now, where I think the fine line comes in is you can have too many days that are just above and beyond perfect bass growing days, where Mother Nature gets confused a little bit with their seasons. So I think female largemouth bass, they need some cool weather so that they can have a little bit more time to develop eggs and really gain weight and grow from that. So I'm going to give you a direct answer. I'm going to tell you, I think South Texas is a great area. I think I like Southern Illinois, but Southern Louisiana. But the problem is they've got all these predator birds that come through there all the time. So I think the middle of Alabama. I think the middle of Mississippi. I think the middle, lower part of Georgia and Florida. I think those are all good zones. East Texas, Central Texas. I think every bit of that, all those places are good areas to be able to grow some gigantic bass. Now, I think the secret is here's, I'm going to tell you what it takes to grow big bass. You got to have happy water all the time. You have to have the food chain to feed the fish from age 0 to 4. If a bass misses 4 or 5 days of a meal, it can't make it up. Now, a bass can miss 3 days or 4 days and eat one big meal and make up those days it lost. But what it can't do is it can't make up for lost time over a long period of time. If a bass doesn't have the food that it needs when it's 12, 13, 14 inches long, it shows up at the back end of its life. When it's old and it didn't get nearly as big as it could have, even though it might have the propensity to get big, and it doesn't have the opportunity because it doesn't have the food. Doesn't work. So I think it's a little bit less about where the geography is as it is to focus on making sure that fish has every meal that it needs every day of its life. If you can do that, you're going to grow some huge fish. Right now, you guys might check out the Sherrilunker program with Texas Parks and Wildlife. There's probably been 6 or 8 bass, 13 pounds or bigger, that have been turned in the last 10 days to the Parks and Wildlife Department to spawn. A Sherrilunker bass for the spawning program has got to be 13 pounds plus. There's been 6 or 7 turned in from O.H. Ivy Lake, which is a lake out near San Angelo, Texas. Now, what's made that lake grow giant fish is it pretty much went dry during the drought of 2011, 12, 13, 14. Then it filled back up, had a whole bunch of brand new habitat stuff grow up in the bottom of it, salt cedar and willow trees, things like that. And when the Parks and Wildlife Department restocked it, now it's taken 5 or 6 years for it to really grow some gigantic bass. That's probably the highest populated area of humans right now in that county is that lake. So all the elements have come together to grow a great food chain, good genetics, brand new habitat, and a lake that probably covers 20,000 acres. So that's the big deal about growing trophy bass. I think you can grow trophy bass in Nebraska. I've seen it done. And it's all about food. It's all about taking advantage of those 125 perfect days. It's all about genetics. If you can bring all those things together, you can grow some huge fish. So where would I do it? I'd probably pick South Texas. That's probably what I would do. There's my direct answer to that question. There's David Schneiderman, Easy Docks. Rob Connors, Sheridan, Indiana. John Funk, need happy water. That's it. Tony Sutton checking in from Oklahoma. Brock Wren, looking for his running buddy, Dan Snyder. Jeff Thompson, limited new hatchery pond in late February. Limed a new hatchery pond in late February with low alkalinity. When would you start checking the alkalinity this spring before trying to fertilize to get a bloom? Right now. Check the alkalinity, Jeff, over there in North Carolina. If your alkalinity checks to be above 35 or 40, you should be able to fertilize because your water temperatures are getting up there. the best time to fertilize happy water is when the temperature is 60 degrees and going up, and before the rooted aquatic plants begin to grow, which is right now. Harrison Davis checking in from Georgia. Yep, we survived the Texas snowpocalypse. Brock Wren, pond boss on a 10-acre pond with 6-foot plus visibility without polarized glasses and filamentous algae growing in the shallow portions. Should we fertilize to darken the water and therefore shade the algae, or poison algae and then fertilize? If poison first, how long should we wait? All right, now here's what I'm going to tell you. Let's see, 6-foot plus visibility in the 10-acre. I'd go ahead and fertilize it. That algae is going to be temporary, and it's going to grow mostly in shallow water. And filamentous algae is so volatile, it really doesn't live that long. It's going to grow up, it's going to die, slough, and new algae is going to grow. So if you can disrupt the life cycle with a good plankton bloom by shading the water, sunlight from the bottom in those shallower areas, then it disrupt its life. You're not going to necessarily fertilize it. Feed it. So I would go ahead and fertilize the pond and get a good bloom going. Figure out which kind of fertilizer you want. Follow the directions, folks. If you over-fertilize, it's hard to unpickle that pickle. If you under-fertilize, it isn't going to work. So follow the label. Use the right amount based on your alkalinity and the volume of your water. And be sure when you put fertilizer out that you mix it thoroughly in the water column, or it ain't going to work. If you pour every fertilizer out there is heavier than water, whether it's granular or liquid. 1034-0 liquid fertilizer weighs 13 pounds per gallon and water weighs 8. You pour that off your boat, it's going to sink straight to the bottom and do no good. You got to dilute it with water, mix it up in the prop wash, or pump it, mixing it through the impeller of the pump with lake water. But you got to get it mixed in the water column, and preferably if you can get it mixed into the top 3 or 4 feet of the water column, you're going to get a bloom quicker. So you take that 5-foot visibility, 6-foot visibility, and decrease it. Now, fertilize the full dose early on. Check it in 5 or 6 days as long as your temperature's in the 60s going up. And if you get a week in and the visibility hasn't changed much, hit it again with half the dose. And then keep measuring visibility. Now if you don't get be sure you're checking temperature too, because if you don't get a bloom, it could be related to the temperature, cold front blowing through, like what's going on right now. We've had a cold front blow through. So, you may get a bloom, you may not, but monitor visibility after you do 2 doses, wait a couple of weeks and see what happens. All right, let me see what else we got here. Nick Allen, John Wilson. Hey, John, good to see you. Devin Thompson, can you keep fish in a silt catching pond? Yes, you can. You know what a lot of guys do? They'll use those silt ponds for more bait fish. You know, it might be a 10th acre pond and then grow 5,000 or 10,000 little bluegill in it and then release them into the fishing pond right downstream. You know, so yes, absolutely yes, you can keep fish. If you want to grow, you know, I've got a couple of clients that buy F1 tiger bass and put them in small ponds. Then in the fall, they take the best of the best and put them in the fishing lake. You know, so yeah, you can do all kinds of stuff. How about copper sulfate for treating? Do you recommend an alternative? Also, if the lake's been treated with copper sulfate forever, do you think change is good? I do think change is good. Filamentous algae there, Nick. Filamentous algae has proven that there's strains of it that are resistant to copper sulfate. So you can change copper sulfate products. Or you can change to one of the peroxide products. So yes, if that pond's had copper sulfate used, whether it's chelated or granular, I think it's a wise idea to change it up, because some of those strains of algae can sure get resistant to it. I've seen it, and Kelly Duffy's told me about it. I believe Kelly Duffy as much as I believe my own eyes. Mike McPherson, 2 diffusers in a 7/10 acre pond at 4 feet deep, too much for winter. At 4 feet deep, too much for winter. I don't think that they would be, Mike. I can't imagine that that's a problem. Okay, there's Morgan Tyler, Purina Mills. Good to see him. Morgan Tyler is a wildlife guy that is a hunter, angler, raising his daughter right. I love Morgan Tyler. I hadn't spent time with Morgan in several years, but that guy knows about wildlife, and he knows about fishing too. He's works for Purina Mills, helps them with wildlife and some of the Aquamax products as well. Okay, let me see what we got here. Heidi Ludwig just bought a property in Washington State with a 2 acre pond that's filled with water shield. I want to make it a swimming pond, so kill off all the water shield. One thing that you're going to be working with there in Washington is that you're pretty heavily regulated. I think you need, pardon me, live TV here, folks, or live something. It's when you're wanting to kill off some plants in Washington, Oregon, California, New York. Those states are more heavily regulated than others. So I would visit with a local agricultural cooperative and see what your choices are in terms of herbicides, but better yet, find an expert in your part of the country. One thing you can do is you can go to the PondBoss website, which is a great resource for everybody anyway. PondBoss.com, click on Ask the Boss. That's a discussion forum where people are on it every day. I don't know how those people get away with it, but they're on it every day. I'm not on it every day because we got great people answering questions, but that's a good resource. Also go to PondBoss.com and take a look at the resource guide and see what that's got to offer for you too. There's Virginia Shields Fisher. My wife talked to you today. I talked to her earlier. She told me you guys had a conversation. We are shopping around Granbury, but you know what? I think that dadgum real estate prices there are so out of line that we're just going to sit back and let that thing stabilize. This Lake Granbury needs to be a premier lake like it used to be. I did see where a 40-pound blue cat was caught last week. That's a pretty big blue cat. That's good. Oops, this thing not scrolling right. So here we go. I think I've seen that size off our dock. That's pretty cool. As, you know, if we were to have a place on the lake, first thing I'd do is set up a fish feeder and start feeding the dadgum fish because that's fun. Tori Rhodes. Tori, if I can get my computer to scroll, I'm going to hit your question. Bob, we're putting small 1/8 acre pond, 1 acre in front of our house property. We have a grove of 2 acres of pines with heavy needle layer. What kind of pH should I expect? Well, here's the thing about pine trees. They grow in acid soils, which typically is sand. So if you've got pine trees growing in sandy soils and you know that there's no buffering capacity in sandy soils, and those pine needles are full of tannins that after they turn green, they turn acidic. So if the water's running off of those pine needles, your water's going to be acid, which is no big deal because a small pond like 1/8 of an acre is not that hard to lime it. You can lime it. Frank James, RE Cormorant Depredation. It's really interesting that I have more copper-nosed bluegill of all sizes packed in my forage pond now, even after the Great Freeze, than ever before. We strung twine all across it, and the dirty birds have left it alone. Yeah, you know, cormorants kind of need a running start. When their little bellies are about full of half their body weight from eating your fish, and they want to fly, it's kind of like they got to get their wings to lift themselves off the water and then run across the water before they can fly. So running some twine across the pond, that really kind of disrupts them. They don't like to get out and walk. Jeff Wallen. Okay, I'm trying to do this here. Now it keeps scrolling faster than I want it to. Holy cow. How many bluegills should a 1 acre pond be stocked with yearly for forage fish and what size? Jeff, I'm going to tell you the answer to that question is it depends on what's there to eat them. You know, if you've got the local high school football team grazing in your pond, you're going to need a lot more food than if you've got 4 gals off the cross-country team. So it really depends on how many mouths you've got to feed. You know, in a perfect world, a 1 acre pond is going to support itself. It's going to, if you do some things like feed the fish, Aquamax MVP, if you feed the fish, you're going to grow more bait fish. If you're culling properly, you know, in a 1 acre pond, that's not much. You could take anywhere from 10 to 30 bass out of there each year, and you're not going to have too many mouths to disrupt and overeat the food chain. So if you want to stock more, you can, but it's going to be based on the balance, or more so on the imbalance of predators to their prey. You know, if you're reducing the predator numbers to let the prey grow more, you're going to be going like that. You don't need to stock anything. But if you want to, you can stock crawfish, you can stock bluegills, you can, depending on where you are, you can stock rainbow trout. So it really depends on your management strategy. There's your answer. It depends on your management strategy. There is nothing mandatory about putting more bait fish in a 1 acre pond. All right, let me scroll down here just a little bit. For some reason, this computer is not wanting to play my game today. All right, let's see here. Let's see here. Chuck Brinkman, can using Tsunami for cattail spread be detrimental to the water quality? Not trying to eradicate them. No, it's not going to be detrimental to the water quality unless you don't follow the label. Now, what can be detrimental to the water quality is if you kill all those cattails, they fall over and decompose in the water. That's what could be detrimental. So the chemical is not usually detrimental to the water because it's labeled for use. It's there for a reason. And I'm not a great big chemical fan, although I think it's important to use it from time to time. I think herbicides is one of the tools in the pond management toolkit, but so are grass carp. So is a weed whacker. So is a teenager with a rake. So I think there's you have a lot of tools there. You've got to figure out which one is the best tool and the best management practice to take care of that problem. Now, see, herbicides fit in that role. Okay, good question. Let me see what else we got here, then I'll get back on topic. Let's see, Tom Conto just dropping in from the Catskill Mountains. Ice will be gone some, down to 8 inches. Yeah, I was talking to Mark Cornwell's wife today about her article in Pond Boss. Actually, we were texting back and forth, and she said they still have snow, which the panhandle of Texas has snow. Well, there's tornadoes ripping the ground all over in Mississippi and Alabama and that even in up to St. Louis, Missouri. Let's see here. Frank James. Chuck, you need a beaver. Yep, everybody needs a beaver. Yep. Looky there. All right, so everybody's having a conversation. I love it. So now I'm going to circle back and talk a little bit more about happy water till you guys have some more questions. Before I do that, I do want to take another minute and thank our sponsors. David Schneiderman, Easy Doc. I love David Schneiderman. Thank you for your sponsorship. Greg Grimes with Aquatic Environmental Services over in Georgia. He's a sponsor now. And I'm going to encourage you, if you need a dock, find Easy Docks of Texas. He ships all over the country. Greg Grimes, he works all over the East Coast and all the way into the Midwest and even parts of the South. So Greg Grimes is a fisheries biologist trained at the University of Georgia, but he really got his learning from the School of Hard Knocks. He's been self-employed for years and years and years. Partnered up a few years ago with John Wilson with Aquadoc, who bought out part of his company over there in Georgia, where they take care of aquatic plants and weeds and things, especially in urban environments. And Greg still handles the fisheries side of things. So if you need a fisheries biologist, look at Greg. If you're looking for somebody to help you with the weeds, look at Aquadoc. Good sponsors. Of course, like I said earlier, I'm a huge fan of Texas Hunter products and a big fan of their service. I placed an order today and Chris Blood called me. He said, hey man, I wanted to talk to you about this. I had a couple of topics and we'll get those feeders out today, but I got these questions. And so we had a really nice conversation. So that was a good deal. So, and also Purina Mills, we're going to be electrofishing the farm lake, I think on May the 5th. So we'll do a live video broadcast on May the 5th from Purina Mills and have some video footage and maybe even go live from the electrofishing boat if we can time it right. So that'll be fun. And I'm trying to figure out how to do more live events. Oh, by the way, got all the content, all the premier content. I'm going to say all of it. All of it we're going to start with. And we'll add more to it as we go. Got to our web designer today. He's sorting through it, getting ready to build our curriculum education website. So the premier content will be ready to go here in a short time. I don't know how long it's going to take him. I'm going to tell you a couple of weeks at the most, and we'll be able to go live. And for those of you that are getting ready to work on some big projects, that content will help keep you from paying so much dumb tax, which I love that. Thanks to Freeman Sawyer for coining that phrase. All right, Kyle Edwards, thought you might enjoy a picture of my bass today. Shot one took me to on Facebook Messenger. Thomas Lanke, Savannah Dew, yep. I may talk about Savannah Dew one of these days. I learned a huge lesson at Savannah I learned a lot of lessons at Savannah back in 2005 and 6. Actually, 2004, 5, and part of 2006. Savannah upstate New York. Dumb tax bad, Kenny says. Yep, so let's talk more about happy water. You know, for you folks that watch this show regularly, you know I talk about the 5 fundamental things of managing a fishing lake. Happy water, habitat, food chain, genetics, and a harvest plan. And it happens in that order. You can't do any of these things out of order and expect it to work. If you don't have happy water and you're trying to harvest fish, it's irrelevant. You know, if the fish are trying to pant because their water's too hot, then the harvest part's less relevant. So it needs to happen in that sequence. Happy water. And so I'm talking more about that. Happy water to me means, man, I wish we had an audience where you guys could respond. I guess you kind of can. But to have happy water, understand these fundamental things about it. Danny Mac, potassium permanganate. That's it. I could not think of that today when you and I talked. Saprolegnia fungus can be killed with potassium permanganate. Danny Mac's got a bass that's struggling after the snow-vid in 2021 in San Antonio and is covered in a fungus. And he sent me a picture of today, and I could not think. I was thinking copper sulfate. No, that's not it. There's something else. That's it. Potassium permanganate. That's it. You know, you do use it in a dip. Now, you don't want to leave them in there for very long. You use them, put them in a dip, and they'll take that fungus out. And then it's going to be a matter of can the fish survive its injuries that cost that to happen. So, anyway, going back to happy water. Water, like I mentioned earlier, is universal solvent. Anything that can dissolve into water will. Anything that can absorb into water will. Think about that. That's absorbing and dissolving are 2 different things. So things that dissolve have a harder time leaving. Things that absorb can leave easier and can be manipulated easier. That's typically like gases, oxygen, carbon dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, things like that. So the best way for water to be happy is to have the opportunity to cleanse itself. And the way water cleanses itself is by contacting the atmosphere. So that circles into circulation. So if you can make your water move, if you can aerate it, if you can circulate it, if you can allow the water to contact the atmosphere, it's going to release gases and absorb gases. And that's one way to have water autonomous and have it consistent, is to move it. The second thing is to be sure that your inputs are not higher. Oh, holy cow, where'd that come from? Woo! I don't know where, I'm sorry. I guess if I'd kept my eyes open, I might not have sneezed, but you wouldn't be laughing like you are now at me. So, minimizing how water utilizes excess nutrients and toxic gases and bad temperatures, that's part of the way that you can keep water happy. So here's an example. Every August, I get a call from somebody who built a 3-acre pond or a 1-acre pond, stocked it with catfish to grow for food, fed the heck out of them for 3 years, and then the pond turned over and the fish died. So what happened? They're wanting to know almost every time somebody killed my fish. They brought in some poison and killed my fish. No, they didn't. You killed the fish with kindness. You fed them so much that they finally got to a density level in the water that the water can't process their wastes. So basically, they're swimming in their own waste and the water can't get rid of it fast enough. That's why aeration is a big deal. That's why nutrient management's a big deal. If you've got a lake that grows too many aquatic plants, there's a reason for that. The reason is sunlight can penetrate to the bottom or penetrate to wherever the level of the plants are growing, and you got enough food for those plants to proliferate. So part of the management strategy is for water to be flushed or for water to utilize nutrients to be extracted from the water. So happy water is a big, big, big deal. And move it, manage the nutrient load in it, make sure the pH can't change much, which you do that with buffering capacity, which is alkalinity. Remember that. You need good alkalinity. Now my nose is stopped up. And there's your little primer on happy water. Let's see here. Harrison Davis, if you say you made a mistake and added some black crappie into a 2-acre bass bluegill pond, what's a good way to fish out or remove a handful of those pesky critters? Well, Harrison, if you say you made a mistake and added some black crappie into a 2-acre bass bluegill pond, what's a good way to fish out or remove a handful of those pesky critters? I actually had that happen one time. I had a guy working for me back then who I gave him a list of which fish to put into which ponds. And one pond was pretty good size, and the guy wanted crappie in it. He put him in the wrong pond. And he didn't know it. Even though he had a map, he had explicit instructions, he didn't get there till after dark. Well, it's his fault, not the landowners or not anybody else but his. So he couldn't see things nearly as well. Bottom line is, he put crappie in a pond. The guy didn't know about it for 3 years. And he kept getting on me because he couldn't catch any crappie in the pond where they were supposed to be. And then all of a sudden, he starts catching crappie in this other pond. Well, by that time, I'd fired the guy. He was gone. And I called him up and said, hey, do you remember this property where you stocked all these fish? Yeah. Well, do you remember where you put the crappie? Well, I couldn't find the lake that you said to put them in, so I put them all in another pond. Brilliant. Well, what's a good way to fish them out? There's not. There's not a good way to fish those fish out. You ain't going to do it. Once they're there, they're there. Now, if it's a healthy bass bluegill pond, you can just cross your fingers and hope that the bass eat them, and which is likely, depending on the water clarity. So there's really not a good way to fish out or remove. And what's a handful? I mean, if you put in 100 and you catch 30 of them out, does that make a difference? No. Because if they're going to establish, it doesn't take that many. It doesn't take but 15 or 20, in a small pond for them to establish. Now, the good news is if you manage the bass bluegill population well enough, then you can keep the crappie from becoming dominant. And then once they grow up, like right now is the time to catch crappie because they're moving shallow from the depths, getting ready to spawn. I was talking to some guys I'm working with over in catfish country over in western side of Mississippi in the Delta. And they got a 9-acre lake that they didn't even know they had crappie in. The guy bought the property a couple of years ago. And they're catching 12 to 14-inch crappie right off the dock. And didn't even know they had them. And they filled the cooler up. I said, keep filling the cooler up. Catch as many of those buggers as you can and take them all out because they really want that lake to be a bass fishing lake. And it covers 9 acres. So, I wish I had a better answer than that, but I guess if you were going to try to catch them, you'd catch them on a jig. There you go. I'll answer it that way. You catch them on a jig, like a 1/32 ounce jig tipped with a mealworm or tipped with a night crawler, and fish where you think they are. That's the hard part. If you can't find them, you're not going to catch them. All right, let's see here. Chad Roberts. Have happy water, happy forage base, and crystal clear water in a 1-acre Ohio pond. I see my fish all the time, but have a hell of a time trying to catch them consistently. When I do catch them, they're healthy. Outside of being a better fisherman, is this oddly a good sign of well-fed? Yeah, it is. And it's also a sign that they can see you. If they can see you, they're wary. Now, my dad and my grandfather used to get on me all the time when I was 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, and they'd take me fishing. Shh, 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 you got to be quiet. You don't want the fish to hear you. Oh, baloney. You know what? Now, if you come stomping on the dock, and that's outside their conditioning, they're not going to eat, But if you come stop on the dock and follow it with a big old red Solo cup full of fish food, when you stomp on that dock a few times with fish food, this isn't fish food, by the way. They're going to be there when you stomp on the dock. So, oh, Harrison, I'm fixing to have an answer for you, buddy. Outside of being a better fisherman, is this oddly a good sign? You know what? If you catch them and they're healthy, they look chunky, I'm going to tell you, yeah, that's a good sign of well-fed fish. If they're hungry, depending on the species, like in Ohio, it could be yellow perch, it could be smallmouth, it could be walleye, it could be largemouth bass. Largemouth bass and smallmouth bass tend to be aggressive. So do bluegill. Walleye, not as much. So trying to catch those fish, where they can see you, not going to be as likely. That's probably more of a skittishness based on their conditioning than anything else. I only put in 2. Thank you, Mr. Lusk, for a clear answer. I kind of danced around a little bit. So here's my answer. Those 2 crappie that you put in there, if you spread their little fins and look, and one's a boy and one's a girl, they're going to date. But if they're both boys, they can date all they want to, but they're not going to have any babies. That's pretty clear. And really, 2 crappie in a small pond, odds of survival of both of those is pretty low, especially where you got bass and bluegill together. All right, Clark Cole, great show. Glad I got new earphones. Yeah, well, you know what? I'm not going to yell into the microphone. Oh, hey, you know what? I was going to tell you guys. I meant to tell you earlier. I've started uploading some podcasts. Now, here's what I'm planning on doing. Since I'm not mowing grass, feeding fish, keeping the cabin clean, and answering questions at my house and working with the garden and keeping the chicken house clean and all that kind of stuff. Now that I have free time, I've started uploading some audio podcasts on SoundCloud. Now, I haven't quite got all my meta tags in there and all my data stuff in it, but I'm going to put it in there under Bob Lusk, the Pond Boss. So if you want to listen to some audio podcasts as you're traveling, what I'm going to be doing there is going back through some of these broadcasts and finding topics where we had a lot of people interested in it, and take those topics and talk about those topics for 15 to 30 minutes at a time. And that way I can stay on the topic, which, I mean, part of the fun of this show here is I get to interact with you guys. I've had several people say, we like that. It's really fun. We'd much rather you get to the point. So the point is, I'm going to do some more podcasts. I just did one on how to build a lake, or the process you go through to build a lake. I added a couple that I did a couple of years ago with Dr. Mark Griffin for Prieta Mills on how fish food was developed. David Reichs from Aqueduct. Actually, John Wilson, you may want to listen to that one, where we talked about water quality, and Landon Wyatt with Natural Lake Biosciences. So I've got 4 podcasts up since day before yesterday, I guess. And I'll add some more as time goes by. So, let's see here. What else we got? Well, that little sneeze sent my sinuses into orbit. Okay, Billy Bates says, Bob, I got my Texas Hunter feeder up and running here now in southern Maryland. Got 100 pounds of Aquamax on MVP on your recommendation, but decided to mix in the 50% protein Aquamax finger. That's a good choice. It was expensive, but I wanted... Okay, come on, computer. You're being sluggish with me here. Well, I'm trying, boys. But I wanted that slightly smaller pellet to get these tiny bluegills eating. That's a great call. Great call. I love that. I think that's brilliant. Perfect timing to do that. Do it to it. Okay, let me see here. We're going to run out of time. Todd says, how long does it take for fish to gravitate towards structure? We put in 15 trees in a 30-acre lake. The trees had weights on the bottom and floats on the top, Christmas trees. 30 minutes. Unless they've got better choices. If they've already got good choices for habitat in that 30-acre lake, they're not going to come nearly as quickly. But if you've just given them a better choice, you're going to find... I have literally put 70 or 80 Christmas trees or mossback fish habitat in a lake, finished the project, go eat lunch, and just for grins, crank up the electrofishing boat and go right back over the top of what we just did. Every single time there's fish in there. So it doesn't take long, especially for small fish, to congregate into dense structure like that. If you put Christmas trees in there, they're going to come to it. And the little bitty fish are going to come in there first. Then some bigger fish around the edges. And then bigger fish are waiting for the little fish to come out. So I'm going to tell you 30 minutes to an hour, unless they've got a better choice. All right, let's see here. Ron, how many eggs can a really big, fertile female white or black crappie lay? If she's 13, 14 inches long, she can lay 3,000 to 5,000 eggs. So like those, whatever Harrison did, if those were two 7-inch crappie and one of them's a girl, she could have 2,500 eggs, 1,500 to 2,500. Which is enough to establish a population. But the odds of that, when you have two fish, odds are not that high. Todd, a month later with the live scope, we did not see fish hanging around the trees. Depends on what month, really. Like right now, I was presuming you did that right now. If you did it now, there's going to be fish. There's going to be fish. Okay, Kenny Sanders has looked it all up. White crappie, 10 to 80,000. And those white crappie, they have more eggs than black crappie do typically. A lot more. But it also kind of depends on their body condition. If you've got a whole lot of them in there, they're not going to have nearly as many eggs because they're not, they don't have the right nutrition. But there you go. That's Kenny Sanderson. He's you know what? I know Kenny. He knows that. He didn't look that up. All right, boys. I'm going to start kind of wrapping things up. I didn't see Wayne and Josie tonight. I know they're here, but I didn't see them. I'll be hollering at them before long. Tony Lawrence, good to see you. Chris Arthur. If I didn't get to greet everybody, it's because I didn't see you. So, yeah, there's Kenny from the hatchery info. Yeah, because you probably have hatched a bunch of those crappie in McDonald jars, so they got to get a good count on those. But those numbers are right in there. I didn't want to say the high numbers, typically because in small ponds, they're not in good enough shape to have that many. But that's the way it goes. Ken and Como, can't wait to get my pond up. Talked on the phone with Bob the other day. He was, yeah, man, we had a good conversation. That was good. Hey, there's Troy Lopez, longtime friend. Good to see you, Troy. Thanks for checking in. So, guys, I'm going to start wrapping it up. You got to have happy water. If you don't have happy water, nothing else matters. I'm working with a guy in South Texas right now. I'm going to write about it in the next issue of Pond Boss. Hey, $35 a year for a subscription to Pond Boss. There it is right here. I have not plugged that today. $35 a year. You're going to go out and have dinner Friday night, spend $50, and it's gone the next day. This is the gift that keeps on giving. Pond Boss Magazine. $35 a year. You can call the office. Subscribe that way or do it online. Where I was going to go real quick about happy water in South Texas is they deal with this thing called summer. Most of those lakes that are built there are built with push-up dams where they just push the dirt up, back water up over shallow areas. A lot of minerals in the soils, and the water quality just goes to crap. So part of our conversation about renovating that lake in South Texas is what do we need to do to have happy water. So focus on that. Happy water. Happy fishing. Have a great time. I really appreciate all you folks checking in. There's Kevin Briggs. Kevin Briggs from North Carolina. I can see him. So I'm going to go blow my nose, stop sneezing, go have a little supper with my son who's right over there, and enjoy the grandkids for a little bit. While I'll meet up with Debbie in a couple days. She's up in Dallas, and I'm about 4 hours from there. So, hey, I really do appreciate you guys watching this show. It kind of keeps me pumped up, makes me want to keep learning and motivated so I can help you. So, until next Wednesday, I'm going to tell you adios.